Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at another interview coming out of Gamescom. These things just keep popping up one after the other. I wasn't trying to stagger all these videos like this. I just keep finding out about them right after I finished recording the previous one. This interview is from thegamer.com, which I'll include a link to in the description, and it just has a few little things. It mentions the possibility of adding new crafting and gathering roles. It talks about the Ascian involvement in 7.3. And one other thing, what does the title say? Sphene's Return, which actually, I guess if you're going to talk about the story for 7.3, you might as well talk about that too. Hot on the heels of 7.3's launch, I was able to sit down with 14 producer and director Naoki Yoshida at Gamescom, and you better believe I tried to get a few answers and clues out of him about that character's appearance at the end of the latest patch and those cryptic final lines. He also discussed the possibility of whether new crafter and gatherer roles could ever be introduced, how the team goes about deciding which other game titles they collaborate with after the recent announcement of Monster Hunter Wilds. So most of these details, I don't think we need to get too into. For example, here one talks about Sphene's return. The original Sphene has made an appearance after unknowingly being kept in stasis all these years. The reintroduction of both Sphene and Living Memory could arguably undermine the acceptance of loss they both represented in Dawn Trail, but for Living Memory in particular, we're over a year since it closed, giving plenty of time for the message to resound with the community. These decisions weren't made lightly. Yoshi-P tells me there were major discussions over whether the real Sphene would make an appearance in the story, whether or not they wanted to relaunch Living Memory. He also tells me that patch 7.1 through 0.3 were written only a month after Dawn Trail launched, so these plot points were decided well in advance of when we would see them unfold. It's actually surprising. 7.1 to 7.3 were written a month after Dawn Trail launched. Now, I think we have some idea of where they actually wanted to go during that time, but the actual written out plot lines weren't done until that point. We know that from interviews that Yoshi-P definitely felt like they did not execute on Wuklamot nearly to the level that they needed to. We have seen interviews from them that have acknowledged the shortcomings of Dawn Trail's release story. So it looks like they may have actually started to do some of the work in response to that after these patches come out. I don't think we've ever, well, not ever, but I don't think we often hear of something being started after the expansion has released. Like I don't know, it's very unusual to hear that, and that speaks to me that maybe they were looking to try to shore up anything. Maybe they were not confident in what they had already planned out, or maybe they literally only planned out the events but didn't focus on writing it. I don't personally think that's the case, but that's just it's just an interesting thought to ponder. I was against the idea of the real Sphene suddenly making an appearance. Back at that time, Sphene makes an appearance at 7.0 as a clone, which is cloned from the memories of the real one. The original one was in a deep sleep. Felt like after defeating the clone Sphene, if the real Sphene returns with the exact same face so early in the story, felt it would come across as cheap, and players would be thinking, well, that's just what Sphene was defeated right now. It was one area where we had a really long discussion about how long we should wait for the real Sphene to make a return. The team decided they could complete Sphene's story arc in about 2 patches, so 0.2, 0.3. Her costume would be changed so that players could distinguish her from the other one. Deciding if the timing of relaunching Living Memory. Yeah, so Living Memory, you know what? This actually also makes sense, because a lot of people filed feedback that they wanted the alive Living Memory to return because it was too gloomy and depressing going to the zone every time, and they also wanted to like take screenshots and stuff. Now, to be fair, using New Game Plus, you can actually still go back to the very golden Living Memory by just putting it any time before the shutdown of it in New Game Plus. That's what I was doing, and I actually used to do, like, I would, when I would go there for like hunts, I would enable New Game Plus just so I would have the bright golden version. But I don't, yeah, I guess that implies maybe they really didn't have it planned to actually turn it back on at that point, since they wrote it afterwards. And that they did that because the player feedback actually wanted it in some way to return, and that has to be written into the story. What was the end? It was for that reason we decided we would utilize Living Memory as a location for the final part of 7.3, where the players would be restoring the thoughts and memories of the people there. First, we shut down Living Memory in order to remove those memories, then we restored Living Memory in order to return those memories. As you mentioned, we decided that time was necessary in order to make that meaningful. Yeah, because it's just honestly their memories at that point. It's not like I'm not sucking through the ether of other planets to maintain all the endless and stuff like that. Naturally, all this talk of being able to live forever as a digital recreation of your original self is to me wondering if that's something Yoshida would ever consider. He immediately answered yes. Oh, we're gonna get digital. That's it. Yoshi-P is gonna be alive forever. They're just gonna make AI Yoshi-P at some point. question concepts such as what it is to live, what it is to die, and what it is to be human, and what it is we call AI now. What is the meaning behind that? I've had this interest for about 20 years now, and I often read science magazines. I'm studying technological trends and such. I think it's a question of whether good or bad, but I consider myself as a human being. Maybe 20 or 30 years later, our cells will eventually die. We can't avoid that fact that we will eventually, well, our lives will eventually come to an end. There's a possibility of transferring ourselves into a digital format and to transfer our thoughts and our mind. I think there's a possibility of doing that if it would be for the benefit and good of the people. If there was a situation where the physical version of himself and the digital version of himself were around at the same time, that wouldn't be a good thing. Yeah, I guess that's fair. There's a Paul Rudd movie where he had a clone of himself. Movie? I think it was a show on Netflix or something like that. The patch 7.3 puzzles. So this was actually a very interesting topic. I guess we'll get a little bit of insight into it. But the 7.3 puzzle was something that it's kind of like an inflection point of Final Fantasy XIV quest design. Because for a long time, people have said, hey, can we get quests that are more involved? You know, can we get a quest that doesn't just run to location, speak to NPC, or kill monster, then speak to NPC? Yeah, we've gotten things like, you know, the magnifying glass and the blow dart mini games. Like, it's a little tiny things, but, you know, at this point they've been done to death and we haven't really seen much new. Until we got to the puzzle sequence for 7.3, which was a very rudimentary puzzle. You could brute force all of them if you really wanted to, but it was certainly a little bit of a mix-up from what we usually get, which is promising given that how long quest design has actually been criticized in Final Fantasy XIV. But man, did I see a lot of people be like, man, this sucks. I just want to do the story, or this is too hard. And I'm just like, listen, I accept that we just won't see eye to eye on that, because really? Or, of course, then there's also that people have the fear of, man, I just want to raid, but they're making me do puzzles. It's like, oh, they just can't win. They just can't win. It's just, there's no winning with this one. I wanted to make the story of the game more realistic. Yoshida explains to me that they didn't want to just have a situation where people are just talking on and on, but instead have the players experience the story and uncover the answers themselves. Yoshida tells me it's not going to be the case that they actively look to incorporate more puzzles unless they feel it's necessary, as they don't want to force themselves to put unnecessary mechanics without good reason. That's probably for the better. In terms of the player response, we did find there's been a positive reception to this portion, but on the other hand, there were also some players who just wanted to rush through to the boss fight, and for them, this portion got in the way of that. So we do want to take into account feedback. So you want to know something interesting? I'm playing Blue Protocol right now, and there are word puzzle sequences. You can brute force them. They're very, very easy, but it effectively is asking you to figure out from text that you've collected it's trying to get you to come to a conclusion, like Sherlock Holmes style, right? But you can literally just click skip to conclusion at the bottom right and skip the entire thing if you're someone who just wants to rush through the quests. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that happen here. If you really are someone who just doesn't care and just wants to get through, have a skip to conclusion button. I don't think that undermines the people who do want to do it, who like experiencing that kind of thing. And hopefully they feel the same way. But that's a recent lesson that I've seen incorporated in some way. The Ascians are back, but not as you might expect. 7.3 concluded with us defeating Calyx, only for the final scene to show him still alive, with an Ascian lurking in the background. We all knew there were a few sundered Ascians left as loose ends somewhere in these reflections, but after the closure of the Hydaelyn and Zodiark arc in Endwalker, specifically the defeat of Zodiark, the Grand Ascian plan of the rejoining to restore the Ancients has well and truly been foiled. So what are our favorite masked miscreants up to now? Yoshida tells me the team discussed how to best depict the remaining Ascians, and that it was an intentional design to leave a time gap up until their appearance in the story, meaning 6.1 until now. And with the end of the Hydaelyn and Zodiark arc for the unsundered Ascians, we were able to cleanly conclude their story, and it would obviously be a turnoff if suddenly the other Ascians suddenly made an appearance. Oh, I mean, some people consider this sudden. If you haven't been listening or paying attention, you would consider this sudden. Fans have been left wondering whether the remaining Ascians will somehow want to find a new way to trigger a rejoining, or whether they are each fulfilling their own personal motives. Before reading on, my personal opinion is that whereas the Ascians from before were focused on a rejoining and bringing back the world that they lost, the Ascians instead now are obsessed with the idea of eternity and effectively never being lost. So almost like a fear on the opposite end, oh, we can fix what happened before, but how do we make sure it never happens again? They're on the make sure it never happens again side of the spectrum. We don't intend on having the remaining Ascians carry over that plan yet, so they're not going to do a rejoining. That makes sense. The reason being, of course, is because the uncentered Ascians are no longer there. At the end of Endwalker, Emet-Selch was satisfied with leaving the rest of the world over to the Warrior of Light, and so we have no intention of writing that story again. I also feel that we shouldn't be writing that, and he'd be completely correct. That it's likely a relief to hear for most fans who are worried about retreading old ground. Yeah, it's especially notable because Living Memory and everything we went through with Amarot, and all the the parallels are very similar. Like, everyone noticed, like, oh, what another dying civilization, or a civilization, you know, trying to be reborn or kept in state. Like, some of the trends are very similar. So it was definitely a fear amongst quite a few people, and a reasonable one at that. The unsundered Ascians have all gone, but because the sundered Ascians have the memory crystals, they do have knowledge of the secret arts and techniques that are passed on from the unsundered. Since they have their own strength and memories, we'll be able to see very soon in the story what they are planning. Because that will be coming quite soon, I do hope that players will look forward to it. So 7.4, 7.5 sounds like we're going to be getting some major details. One thing I can say is you will be able to see there's clearly a different goal. You also find out what is the key in the possession for the Warrior of Light. That key, a lot of people think, is Auracite. Like, and that this is somehow going to tie into Ultima the High Seraph. Ultima is a loose thread. I know people would think that we defeated them already, but Ultima is not strictly that one being that we defeated. Ultima is effectively, as we've come to potentially understand, almost like an interdimensional alien in a sense. And so them being brought into the world again is not entirely off the table, especially if they've left any other relics behind. We know that Ultima was actively around during the time of the Ascians, and so it's a question of, you know, are they going to somehow tie it all back? Because Ultima the High Seraph could make for a pretty good threat. Emboldened by Yoshi to give me a few clues, I can help but ask about the Winterer peers that Calyx mentioned to the Ascians he's with in the final moments. We left wondering this term that the remaining Ascians have given themselves, or that if it's a nod of what's to come, perhaps foreshadowing us traveling to the frozen waters of Blind Frost and Authard's North, that Emet-Selch mentions us. Fair assessment. I've seen other people say the same thing. Yoshi tells me we will soon find out what Winterer refers to, because it's not a name for the remaining Ascians. As an added tease, he tells me I could say that it might be easier to discuss about the possibilities if you check the definition of Winter as a word. Credit to the interviewer and the person who wrote the article. Winterer is a person, animal, or a thing that winters, meaning it visits or resides in a specific place during the winter season, or it refers to someone or something that endures a period of hardship or difficulty, such as a difficult period of life. Yeah, I mean, Winterer to me resides in a specific place. Again, it sounds like there's like this. I'm gonna go back. Travanchet, everything he's ever touched has been about building utopias. And while that's not entirely unrealistic for something the Ascians were already doing, Emet-Selch was creating empires and the theory of them being utopias. I've wondered, because he just seems to be dealing in old legendary like items like the horn, and a lot of people have pointed out that the Enigma Codex is actually not too dissimilar from Electrope in a lot of ways. And so the Travanchet bit I'm really holding on to. I hope that comes to fruition, because that has been a loose thread for literally ever since 1.0. And it never seemed like he was in line with what the other Ascians were doing. It's just it never really seemed like he's aligned with them. Will we ever see a new crafting or gathering role? New job roles are added to 14 with each expansion. Well, new jobs, not new job roles. But never any new crafting or gathering jobs. It's understandable, as these are also intricately linked to each other in the economy, that introducing new jobs, I'm going to replace the word roles with jobs in this case, could entirely upset the whole balance. Regardless, I'm ever hopeful, so I asked Yoshi if it would be possible. He said there's not a zero possibility of it happening. That's not very... Yeah, I would take that as... the not zero is the Yoshi-P way of going like, oh, I don't want to say no unless I'm 100% certain, but it doesn't mean it's definitely very far from yes. If we feel like we want to do it, we can make it happen. We've considered the existing economy we have within 14 when we think about where we might put in a new role. We haven't found one which we think would be a good fit. Yeah, because I remember in WoW, I wasn't really crazy about any of the crafting and gathering. It's very simple. You know, you just press the button, the number goes up, the thing gets made, blah, blah, blah. It was more about collecting the recipes and whatnot, like a rare recipe dropping off of like a trash mob in a raid or something like that. But when archaeology came out and it became about uncovering all these old relics and looking for secrets in them, that was far more intriguing to me, but it was a very finite thing that they added, almost like a limited gather. I hate saying that, but like it kind of makes sense in this regard. Like getting the Yogg-Saron box from that was you know, it was great. I'm sorry, Yogg-Saron, sorry, Enzoth, the Enzoth box from that was a super cool thing to get, and you know, teased things that would, you know, come years down the line. So I always think of archaeology in my experience with that when I think of other things they could do, but it would be incredibly limited and would really be more about world building, teasing, and I don't know if they're interested in doing that, something that really has like that again really feels finite, I suppose. As an example, Yoshi says if they would add a crafting role specifically for housing items, problem is that, well, you don't do that. You just, like, for example, if you wanted to make engineering a thing in Final Fantasy XIV, then you just need to create methods with which, you know, you have metals that make gears and the gears make that. The question is, what purpose does it actually serve the player? Because, like, unless you're going to add, like, a new equipment slot or something like that, like, what would engineering really bring? Would it just bring stuff that looks like that just looks different from the others? You know what I mean? Like, that becomes the key issue, is that it has to serve such a specifically newly added purpose, and not kind of just fit into things like this, where he's saying with the housing item roles. That's kind of why I understand that we just don't get them, because they have to create entirely new purposes for having them in the first place. For each crafting role they had a corresponding gathering role, so if they want to add one new role, they'd actually have to add two. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. Like, people are complaining about the lack of slots in their armory chest. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. I would probably address the armory chest thing first. No, he's got a point there. Yoshi emphasized, I do want to add more to the game, but when I consider the question about whether it would be a positive for all the players, that's something I'm really torn about. It leads Yoshi to spitballing more ideas, throwing out the example of a mount crafting. See, that's the thing. You just want to craft, like, specifically mounts. I mean, one crafter could craft mounts might not go down so well either. Another example he mentions is instrument, but that would be moot, as instruments can be made by carpenters. Made the mistake of asking me if I had any good ideas, but sadly, my triple triad card crafter role suggestion doesn't seem to be the answer he's looking for. Yeah, I think that's fair. Get a lot of requests for implementing snowboarding in the Final Fantasy VII snowboarding game. No, we wouldn't add a crafting. No, Yoshi, nobody would want a crafting class for snowboards. How would that even... we're just talking about the snowboarding, man. You can rent snowboards. I assume that Godbert can scrounge up some boards that could pass as snowboards. Come on now. At Games... Okay, and then we have the new Monster Hunter collab. It's a permanent fixture. At Gamescom, Yoshida announced an upcoming collaboration with Monster Hunter Wilds and some balking idea to having to get to level with some balking at the idea of having to get to level 100 and complete Dawn Trail before being able to participate. While it was a safe bet that this collab would be permanent, much like the previous one, Yoshida assuaged all doubts by confirming it during the interview. Yeah, I mean, it was to be expected, right? Nobody expected it to be temporary after Rathalos. It will be permanent. We do understand that some players may be taking a break, but we don't want them to resubscribe immediately to Final Fantasy XIV. Bold statement, but I mean, I guess the idea is that the collaboration, looking at people who are unsubscribed right now, they don't want people to see the collaboration, be like, oh, I have to do that right when it comes out or I'll never get to do it. They're like, no, it'll be there. Like, you can do it when you come back at some point, you know, if you come back at some point. More details will be announced next month, but what I can say is that we've prepared a lot of rewards and prepared battle content so it can be enjoyed by both casual and hardcore. Okay, so there's a lot in that statement. First, casual, hardcore. Rathalos has a normal and an extreme. Basically expecting the same here, but prepared a lot of rewards. We haven't seen most of those rewards yet, but I think the same thing happened with Rathalos, where we didn't know about the Rathalos armor right away. We only knew about the Rathalos mount, and we only knew about the minion, but we prepared a lot of rewards. I'm thinking weapons, Arkveld weapons for everyone. I mean, I guess I can't rule out an armor set, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just not optimistic. That they made a custom Rathalos set with, everyone used to make fun of the female Rathalos panties, the Rathalos coil panties. But they were like not the Monster Hunter set. They were like Final Fantasy XIV made a Rathalos themed set, and that was kind of disappointing for quite a lot of people. So if you prepared a lot of rewards, weapons make the most sense to me there, but will we have Guardian Arkveld armor? I don't know, because I feel like they'd either have to make sets for everyone, or they would have to make a set that was like, that follows their usual creed of like, no matter what job you're on, it's not confusing to other players, I suppose. And then that means like something like the Rathalos set becomes more likely, where it's like really tuned back and thus isn't exactly what people want. So it's kind of a tough place. I think it's going to be, a lot of people also want an Arcveld mount. I think it's still a possibility. Like, yeah, the Securet as the mount from the normal mode. I think the Securet will be the mount for defeating the normal mode. I do not think it will be a mount for the extreme. And I actually do think we will see an Arcveld mount for the extreme. We'll have more details, like I said, sometime next month, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they decide to do. We're investing a lot of resources into the development of the content, and I hope players will be able to enjoy it in the long term. 14 has collaborated with many other games over the years, including not just Final Fantasy or Square Enix titles, but series like Yokai Watch and Fall Guys. Can't help but wonder which game the team decides to work with. I think the way that collaborations are decided depends greatly on the team. Within the Final Fantasy XIV development team, we consider how much we know the game title and what we're interested in working on, how much respect and admiration we have for those titles. I believe that unless we have that respect, we wouldn't be able to create the best content. We don't really consider a promotional aspect to it, but it's more of a case of if we feel it would generate hype, then we would want to do it. It's often the case that I would be talking with the producer or director of the partner, and we would have a mutual respect for each other. In that regard, I think it's kind of mysterious because there's no format that's set in stone. Sometimes I'll approach the other party, and sometimes they will approach me. Using Fall Guys as an example, Yoshida tells me the team knew they were big in 14 players in the past, and he'd seen it on social media, so when they reached out to say they were interested in doing a collaboration, he was only too happy to agree. No, I'm happy. It's really a case of us respecting each other as developers. Okay, so it's really not a matter of just like, you know, oh, what would be really cool. It's just, I mean, honestly, yeah, Fall Guys, it's just literally didn't seem like it was, there's any way they just thought like, yeah, we need to do this, but it was more like, oh, they reached out to us and want to do this, we like them, they like us. So it's kind of just like, it's kind of like just a handshake moment where it's like, you know, oh, you know, yeah, sure, why not, you know, kind of deal. It's like your friend asking if you want to do something, except this thing happens to be a massive collaboration added to an MMORPG. Yeah, so I think we could create something typically wouldn't be possible usually. I would like to continue working on crossovers. Man, it's too bad that like plugins kind of ruin the fun of the Fall Guys event because of the title that was associated with it, because I actually thought it was really creatively well done, and actually worked pretty well within Final Fantasy XIV. Just, you know, the plugin bit kind of ruined it, which I hate saying right now with all the plugin drama, but like, let's be honest, it really is what ruined it for a lot of people. As a final question, I asked Yoshida what he enjoys most about his job when he's not permanently stressed by everything, if that ever happens. It's something that he has to think hard about. I think that when I'm doing game design, because I didn't get into this job because I wanted to be a producer, but rather think that the title game designer is what fits me best. When I'm working on planning the new game and planning systems, and for 14, when we're working on designing content, I think that's the most enjoyable for me. Also, as someone who gets to travel the world and speak to people at events, it is questionable to think about whether that counts as work, but that speaking with players and fans is something he enjoys. I'm able to hear their responses directly, so I can hear they might give me some really critical and tough feedback, or they might give me a very positive response, but at the end of the day, I consider all of our players our comrades together, and we are creating 14 together. I think this is one aspect of my job, which may be, me being in my position, only I can appreciate and I can enjoy. But it's something that I really do appreciate from the support of all of our players. Now, if you excuse me, I have to go and start spiraling down the rabbit hole of new theories. Thank you. I think the person's name was Mel at the top. Let me see. It was all the way at the top. Meg. Sorry, I knew it was M-E. I couldn't remember the last one. Thank you, Meg, for the interview from thegamer.com. Don't forget to go to the description and actually click on the article so that you can give them the clicks, give them the recognition, which means they get more interviews in the future. It's a pretty interesting stuff, both on the story standpoint and from the Monster Hunter standpoint. So it was a good time. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned. Any more interviews come out, I'll be sure to post them as well as my usual content on the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time. Until then, take care.